A very warm welcome to all the viewers watching Soul to Soul Talk Show. In this episode, we have a new acquaintance with us, Brother Eric Lawson from New York, who is an insurance engineer and who has been associated with the Brahmakumaris, a family member of the Brahmakumaris since the past 27 years. Welcome to the show, brother.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's ours too. So, brother, well, I have personally not heard what an insurance engineer profession does. So, what do you do in that profession?
My background in training and education was in civil engineering. And so what I learned there is how things work. And there's a lot of people who make things in factories. There's a lot of buildings. And in order to kind of keep your business going, you buy insurance. And the people who sell insurance hire people, engineers, to understand what the hazards are, what the risks are, what the processes are to minimize the risk. And so my job was basically to see how people did things and what they did and give them advice so that they would continue safely in business. And different people, different things. A lot of times we try to stop fires and stop explosions. I think in the studio you have what we call a sprinkler system, where if there was a fire, there would be water automatically. Someone has designed that, someone has planned that, someone has built that, and someone has taken the advice of an insurance engineer to do so.
So you give the ideas?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
And we negotiate a little. If you do this, then we'll give you a less rate. I'm not sure in India if they do this for car insurance, but in the United States, in New York, if you take a driver's safety class, you get a reduced insurance rate. Okay? And if you go for 5 years without an accident, you get a reduced insurance rate. The same is a little true with business and buildings and property. That if you build it the way we want, if you do the things that we like you to, you get a reduced rate. And so both what people do and how they do them are a bit of what I did when I was working.
Good. So in this show, you are introduced as like a spiritual person on this, who will be guiding us in the spiritual journey.
Yeah.
So as a insurance engineer, do you like bring in spirituality in your profession?
I do. I didn't used to, and it's kind of a full story. It's a lifetime story, which we won't share the complete part here. But when you got experienced in things, you'd be able to tell how somebody thought and what they were thinking, what their values are and what their priorities are. Because when you start, you learn rules and you learn laws and you learn experience. You know, if you have these things, they explode, so don't put these things too close. If you put the wood near a fire, it'll burn, it'll cause the building to burn down. And so you learn the rules, but after a while you get to learn to know whoever's in charge, how they think, what their priorities are. So I can walk into a building and see how someone thinks and start to recognize not what they're doing, but how to help them make their lives better. Okay? And so when we start to be clear on our own self, when we're able to start to see what others prioritize, then we can engage them in a conversation. We can start to talk about how they can make it better. And the spirituality isn't converting anybody, and it's not about putting an idea across that this is better or not, but it's helping them to see. Okay, and actually what I was able to do, and it might be a little exaggeration, is to see into the future. Okay, really? In
others' future or your own future?
I give them a choice. When I was working, I would come in to a building or a studio like this and say, all the things that you have out in front, history shows that that's a hazard. And people can get hurt. People can die because of the steps or because of the things like this. So let's imagine for a moment, okay? You've got this stuff here, it's going to burn, there'll be a fire, this is what our history has shown. If you lost this building, if you lost your employees, think about that for a moment. Is that something you would like? Look into the future. See this outcome of your behavior. And typically they would say, that's not what I want to do. That's not where I want to go. It's like, well, okay, then let's see what we can do together to try to minimize that, to reduce the loss, to take care of the situation. So the spirituality isn't, outright, but it is more of a sense of calming the self and starting to be clear on what's going on and to be able to communicate the fact that there are responsibilities, that there are laws at work. The law of karma comes into play, the law of the values, because many people, when I said you could walk into a building, they put money over people, okay? And so sometimes it's unsafe, and sometimes it's dangerous, and sometimes accidents happen in that situation, and they have consequences they don't want. But if they start to change their spiritual outlook, if they start to change their values, then all of a sudden you can tell where there's a successful business because there's care for everybody and there is the application of those laws. Some places I go into, it's clean, it's organized, it's smart, and people are happy. Their spiritual values are tapped into and they work better. And the management would often say that because I have happy workers, because they know I care for them, they help at work. When I ask for something, they deliver, which is totally different from a place where all I care about is money and you are the worker and you will do what I say. Then there's anger. Then if it goes really bad, there will people who will try to upset or get back or deface or interfere or cause problems. So it's the spiritual perspective, it's the nurturing of the values that most find beneficial. Not everybody knows that, but that was kind of what my job was, to know the technical things, but to be able to integrate the benefit of a spiritual perspective in the workplace.
Did you develop this sort of skill through the years, or did you have it like inborn?
It was developed through the years, but it basically got developed when I started to practice meditation. Okay, because I started to see myself differently. I started to see different alternatives, how I could interact in the world. And so as I got comfortable in applying these things, I was more comfortable in sharing those things. And so my workplace became kind of a experiment for how to communicate and tap into and connect and illustrate the value of spirituality and the financial benefit of values in one's life.
Financial benefit?
Well, yes. The choice would be here. Where would you want to put your money? In a place that could burn up and you would lose it all, or a place that you could invest and it would give you a profit today and tomorrow? And so the values are a great investment. Okay, and it's a tricky thing because you have to catch people in a spiritual perspective. Not everybody gets that. A lot of people, this is my cost, this is my expense, this is what I have to do, and they only see dollars, and they don't see the consequences of their actions. They don't see how their values affect others, how their thinking can affect another person's life and their industry and everything that they do. Values are very financially good investment.
Have you insured yourself, brother?
Many ways, yes.
Okay.
I insure myself because I try to act in accordance for my well-being. You know, I try to eat right, I try to exercise, I drive safe, but you never know what could happen. And the country that I come from, the United States, for example, it's nice to spread the risk around. It's nice to have a partner. It's nice to share those things. And if I didn't have car insurance and house insurance and health insurance and all those things, it could be very expensive. And it's easier for me to budget a little every month to buy insurance rather than trying to take care of a big expense all at one time. Sometimes people buy insurance because they're afraid, and that's a good thing. It's not fear, but it's an understanding that things can happen. And so it's not based on fear, but it's based on minimizing risk. Okay? And so if I put a little something here and a little something here, then I've got partners, I've got some financial wherewithal, and therefore I don't have any fear. What I do have is an understanding that accidents happen. I do have an understanding that things can take place and it could be me, and I'd prefer to give a couple dollars here and not use it rather than have to give thousands and thousands of dollars here later on. So it's, the way we would say, it's an investment and it gives you peace of mind.
But do you fear anything?
Do
you experience fear in any situation?
Fear?
Yeah.
Not so much. I don't like pain, okay? I don't like suffering. But one of the things that I think I've learned in kind of coming to India, I've had the opportunity to be here a number of times, is not to be afraid, but to recognize that I have qualities. If I apply those, then there's going to be benefit in acting with my values, my spiritual perspective, being able to make friends, being able to understand, being able to listen. It kind of takes away some of the fears. Now, sometimes I might not have a lot of energy to act the way I want to, but that's another question, another story.
Brother, you said you visited India, so what was the reason, any purpose of your visit?
Yeah, I mentioned just a little earlier that when my life had meditation involved, that I had another perspective. And the meditation that I've gotten involved with is Raja Yoga. And some of the, my teachers' are located here. And I thought it would be interesting to come and meet some of them, come and understand a little more about that. It's an exciting place. It's very different than New York. And that kind of pull, I decided not to have any fear and follow through. What is India like? I don't know, but why not try it?
Are you talking about the headquarters of the Brahmakumaris?
That's where I've mostly come to, into Mount Abu, to meet and understand, and been able to do that now for about 27 years. And made a number of trips, many trips, about once a year, but now I'm making more than that, so it's very wonderful.
Are you a believer in God?
I am. I do. And it's been an interesting process for me, because in the West, I was brought up in the Roman Catholic Christian tradition. And I make a distinction between what they taught me and what I learned, because all I can really vouch for is what I learned when I was growing up. And what I learned was that there is a God, and I've always believed that. But I also
How did you?
It was just something that I accepted.
Okay, just
growing up, that there was a spiritual sense, and I didn't question.
you didn't reason it out. Just
It
accepted it.
makes a lot of sense to me. One of the comments in the Bible is that God created you in His own image, and therefore there's a sense that there is a being. It was never an issue for me. There was always this sense. But I also learned that we might not know God, okay? That He's unknowable or far away or beyond our comprehension. And so those two things kind of put me into a state of being where I believe in God, but I'm not sure exactly what I believe in. But I believe that there is something. And there's, hard to rationalize a spiritual perspective on that. But it was very comfortable in that understanding, and how it was working was another issue. Where is He? What does He do? How is He helping? And that was good guidance, because it helped me kind of watch what I did, follow kind of the rules of the land, be nice to people, not kill them, and stuff like that.
So you were God-fearing, should we say?
Not God-fearing, but wasn't sure what I was afraid of. Okay? And so it's good to...
Just felt someone is watching you.
Somebody's watching you and not sure. But it's interesting to believe in God, but at the same time, believe that you can't ever know who God is. And when I came to India, that was changed. I had a closer sense that I could understand what that being was like, and who that might be. And one of the fascinating things that I experienced when I came here was that we learned that God creates us in His own image. And we also learned that we are spiritual beings. Soul, that's what I learned in my upbringing. That I was the body and I had this soul and I had to take care of it because it was going to go on. When my life was over, I still had this entity, this spiritual aspect of myself that would go on. And it was fascinating for me because what I learned when I came to India is body and soul, but it was just like this, that I identified now with the spiritual thing that went on, and I left my body behind. So I didn't change my beliefs, but I just reordered them. And when we start to think that I'm a soul and God creates us in His own image, then obviously He's a spiritual being. He's a soul. He's just like me. He created me, so we're the similar. So that gave me the great understanding of my own spirituality, my own eternity, my own set of values. And it also gave me a way to know this other being. And so I was quite pleased to have that recognition. I didn't change my feelings for Christianity, but I was able to understand it at a deeper level and a deeper way that was more profound for me.
So do you still call yourself as a Christian?
I don't call myself much of anything, actually.
Belong to any religion as such then now?
I don't go to the regular church that I used to. And some of those behaviors, I guess you might say, or rituals or practices, I've kind of drifted away from. However, I do feel that the God that I was communicating with, that being is even closer. And it would be almost, if this analogy would work, when you look at something with one eye, you see one perspective. But when you use both eyes, it becomes 3D, it becomes real. And now from two perspectives, it becomes even richer. And I find that there's a deeper meaning, a deeper reality, a deeper feeling because of those two concepts coming together for myself.
Brother, you said God creates us in His own image. Could you explain that?
Well, that would be a passage out of the Bible, and I'm not an expert, so I can't give you chapter and verse. But it is a saying that's somewhere in there, and if you give me one, and I'll come back next time with the half an hour later, we'll quote that. But it is God creates us in His own image, or that's how I learned it. It might be said a little differently, but what that does is, the typical Hollywood Western understanding is that means that God's, an old man on the clouds, because we see ourselves as human beings, and we extrapolate that is what God is like, that He's like us. But it's actually different, that He's this soul, and that we're this soul, and that we're in the body, and that when the body stops, this spiritual being that I had always believed in, that I was always taking care of, which is now me, is a lot like that. That energy, that light, that consciousness, those experiences, those values, there's a similarity.
So you had always believed that you were a spiritual being, like even before your visit to India?
Yeah. I had an experience when I was younger, and we have a process that I grew up with called confession. Okay?
Called confession. Okay,
it's called confession. And what you do is, if you're a very good believer, that periodically you would go and you would share what you've done wrong. You would confess, I did this, and I did this, and this was wrong. And I was kind of young, so I didn't do a lot of bad stuff. When you're 10 or 12, you're not like a big criminal. I wasn't anyway. And so I didn't have a lot to say, but they kind of encouraged you to do it. And I said, I must have, taken something or told a lie, or I was probably lying then, Lying in confession is not a good thing to do. But it was one of those things where when I came out, they said, you have to do some prayers and you have to do some things, and I did that. But I remember leaving church and feeling so light, and it was almost as if I was floating. Okay? It was an odd experience for a 10-year-old or 12-year-old, like what's happening to me? But there was this sense that a spiritual experience, awakening, or confirmation, or some experience was being planted in me, and somehow another is like, oh wow, this is good. Maybe it's connected to what I did, and I'm not real smart, and I couldn't figure it out, and I was a young kid, and so we went on and did something else. But it was quite profound. And so had always had this feeling that there's an aspect in the world, there's an aspect about us that is unseen. And so I respected that. It was just kind of one of those things that I never had to fight about my belief. I wasn't always sure what I believed, wasn't always sure what was the reality of things, but didn't have a fear of those things, but just might not understand it. Okay, electricity is a little like that.
Right.
I have great respect for electricity. I don't always know how it works, and I know I shouldn't put my finger in the socket, but it's kind of nice to believe and use electricity.
Benefits of it, yeah.
Right. It's good to have God in your life, I guess.
And did that experience influence your future years?
In a way, it kind of kept me on a track during, growing up, because it's probably like India now, but in the United States, there's lots of things that are less spiritual that are offered to you, if you understand. And so those pull your intellect, they pull you away, and they're very powerful. Money, position, experiences, things. You get very distracted, and I'm assuming that India is going through that, where the West, we're very generous with our values. We share our TV, we share all these things, and maybe not all of it is wildly uplifting. So there were times when I wasn't sure what was right for me or how to do things, but that little bit of that experience would pop up every once in a while and remind me that, keep looking, keep checking it out. And so I had done some reading and done some research, not always finding things, but it made sense when I heard someone talk about Raja Yoga meditation, you are the soul. Then it just kind of fell into place for me. It was very, very easy and natural with that.
So in this episode, we spoke with Eric Brother and got to know his journey, his initial from childhood and his profession, the journey he covered, and how he learned the art of Raja Yoga, and how it sort of shifted his belief systems. And we will be discussing more of his experiences as a spiritual being in the forthcoming episodes. So we are hoping that you will join us in this journey in the next episode too. Thank you, brother, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you, viewers, for joining us in this episode. Have a great day. A big welcome to all the viewers watching Soul to Soul Talk Show. In this episode, we have with us Brother Eric from New York, and we will be continuing this journey as we had started in the previous episode. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for coming again. Brother, in the previous episode, you told us that you had visited India and you learned the art of Raj Yoga and how it influenced your life.
Correct.
And this art of Raj Yoga is taught by the Brahmakumaris. So, how did you come in contact with the Brahmakumaris?
I was living in the United States in a city called Chicago, Chicago, Illinois, which is in the middle of the country. And I was working, and I worked out of my home, so I would travel in the car to different places, back and forth. And I used to listen to a radio program. It was an interview show, a little like this. There was someone who was wise and clever and prepared, a little like yourself.
Like yourself?
Like yourself. And they would interview leading thought individuals, whether it was in business or the arts or spirituality. And it was a very nice show. New Dimensions was the name of the show. Yeah, it was wonderful. Out of San Francisco. And at one time they had interviewed someone who was associated with the Brahmakumaris. Her name is Sister Genti. And she was involved from the London center headquarters at that time. She still is, actually. And what she said, I heard in a way that resonated. I liked what she said. There was something about what she said and how she said it that made some sense to me at that time. And this was a long time ago. It was before internet, it was before email, it was before electronic things. And so at the end of radio programs, they would say, if you want more information, write to this address. Okay, and so I took that down, I wrote that down, and I wrote a little note saying, I heard the talk, very interested, can you tell me some more? And the Brahmakumaris had a center in San Francisco, because this was a rebroadcast, it wasn't live.
Okay.
And so I sent a letter, and a month later a reply came back saying, you know, we were busy, we had all sorts, yes, we have things, here's a book list, here's some of the things that we do. And I looked at that and I said, well, you know, maybe I should order a book. It's very easy to order a book. Amazon wasn't invented, you couldn't go online, it wasn't. So you filled out a little form and you put a check and you mailed it back. And then a month later, I got a couple books, but the one I ordered was the correspondence course, okay? And so I learned Raja Yoga meditation
Yourself?
through the correspondence course.
Oh.
Because when I was learning 27 years ago, the United States had about 6 or 7 or 8 centers, New York, Florida, Texas, California. And I was literally about 1,000 miles away from anybody who knew anything about this. And so I took the course one lesson at a time. And, you know, there was a lesson on soul, there was a lesson on God, there was a lesson on karma. And I would get something in the mail and I would read it, and then it would sit for a couple days, and then I'd go back to it and I'd answer some questions, and I'd put that in the mail, and it would take a couple days, and then they would set it for a while. So it took about a month for each lesson.
For each lesson?
For each lesson.
Okay.
So it took me about 9 months to do the 7 days course in that sense. And after the third month or so, I ordered some other books that were written by very experienced yoga practitioners here. There's someone who I had met later on, Brother Jagdish was his name. He was done a lot of books, and so I read some of his books, The Way and Goal of a Raj Yogi, for example, and so learned with a little written guidance and some of the original writings from very experienced individuals from India, and was able to make sense that, you know, this is what is right for me, that I'm a spiritual being, that there's a spiritual being who I can have a relationship, that I'm eternal. My background was engineering, so kind of things had to make sense. 1 + 1 = 2, so right and karma, those things all I could make sense with. And so naturally just kind of felt an affinity. And so for a year and a half, I had been practicing this based on the literature of the Brahmakumaris by myself. And then I met someone, they came to visit, and then they said at a long time ago, well, there's not much happening here, maybe you could help teach others. And so got involved that way because I felt this was a very true and very powerful and very correct for me.
Was there no concept in this knowledge that contradicted, say, the beliefs, say the laws that you had learnt in science, or
No.
anything that you have learnt that you had believed before?
It didn't. For me, it made perfect sense. For example, in engineering, we get a lot of physics and
Right.
linear analysis and way too much stuff that I don't remember anymore. But one of the laws of thermodynamics is matter's eternal. And you can't create or destroy matter, but you can change its form. Well, if you can't create it, then it's always been there. It's eternal. And so where does it go? How does it do these things? That was a belief. And so when you recognize it on the spiritual level, the soul, the being is eternal, then it's just an interplay and it's a change. And I was quite fascinated because in the United States and maybe other places, they have differences of opinion about time. That there's a beginning and an end of time. You know, God, let there be light, and then there's Judgment Day is a common belief by many. And I think that's true. And there's also this sense that time is eternal. You know, there's no beginning and there's no end. And I also believe that's true.
How can both be true?
Well, if you have a beginning and an end, and you bring the beginning and end together, then you have a beginning and an end, but it becomes cyclical, and so it's eternal. And so it very naturally brings two contrary ideas together. Okay? And somehow I feel I'm alive. Maybe you can tell that I'm here and such like that. And I feel alive. And I also feel that there's a spiritual aspect to myself. And so that concept of soul was there. And for me, if somehow I'm a spiritual being and I can organize matter around myself as a body and I can hold on to that living, I don't know how I do that. I really don't. I don't know how I'm alive, but I am.
Yes.
And if I'm doing it once, I could probably do it again. So when the body stops, whatever the relationship between soul and matter takes place, it can take place again. I can probably have had other experiences, and so in this cycle of time, I can probably have more than one life. And it makes sense to me. Also learned that this might not be my only place of existence. That in the Western concept, in the spiritual experiences that I grew up with, there was a place beyond. Okay, they call it heaven. But there's lots of concepts, there's lots of words, there's lots of names for that. And in the East, in Raja Yoga, different name, same place. So it was a matter that if I'm a spiritual being, there must be a spiritual place that I'm comfortable with. If there's one person, soul like me, there's probably someone else like you. So I start to see people different. If we have a relationship on a spiritual level, there's maybe a family, then God comes into it. So a lot of things, that's probably why it took me 9 months to think some of these things through. But I went from the perspective of a belief and adding things onto it and questioning why it works, as opposed to many people, what's wrong with it, and if I find one thing that doesn't make sense, then I disregard everything. So it was a positive questioning to figure out how I worked and what my experiences were and how I might learn more about that. And what I was taught and what I read seemed to fulfill that quite well.
Even the art of meditation, you practiced it yourself. There was no one to guide you?
Not in the way that many are guided.
Right.
They didn't have many commentaries, so there was just music. And so basically that's correct. Read some things and think about some things. I think when we start to use some of the principles, it would be a principle both in spirituality and physics, that whatever you put your attention on grows. Right. Whatever you think about starts to get pulled into you. It's like a spotlight. And I wish I was a genius and could tell you exactly what the law of science is, but there's the indeterminate principle that when you look at something, you make it happen. In physics and science at a subatomic level, there's that process that takes place. And that very much makes sense with the laws of consciousness. That what I start to think about, I start to create, I start to act, I start to empower. And so meditation is very scientific for me. Okay, how do I start to empower the qualities that I want? Well, I start to think of those, and I start to think of those, and I start to act with those. I start to share those. I start to move into that experience, and I'm able to apply all of that process.
So you talk to yourself in meditation? Or?
In the beginning, you know, and it's if I had to define meditation, it's just conscious thinking. Okay, what am I thinking now? What is the experience or feeling or consequence of that? Do I want more of that? Yes or no? Okay, and is my thought filled with peace? Is my thought filled with love? Is my thought filled with the joy or the harmony that is natural and essential for myself? And if I'm thinking along those lines, then I think I'm doing it right. And if I'm thinking in a way where there's anger or fear or negativity or sorrow, that's not how I want to lead my life.
Right.
Those aren't the qualities that I like to have, and so they're not my natural qualities. And if I'm a spiritual being, then let me just nurture that spiritual side of myself. And so that was kind of the practice. How do I start to control my thinking, guide my thinking, activate the qualities that I want in my life, and make myself more naturally who I am?
And you said you got a real perspective, a real 3D picture of God in this course. So who is God now?
Yeah, who is God
For
now? Many things. It's quite amazing because it can be anybody I want. It can be my friend, it can be my companion, it can be my mother, it can be my father. And quite amazing, I think God has the same abilities that you and I do. That how we think of Him is how He appears. Okay? And it's quite interesting. It's wonderful for me to think about that however I think of and however I call and however I address that being is how He comes to me. I'll use you as an example possibly, that you have a name that you go by, but you might be called by your mother one thing, you might be called by your friends something else, you might be called by younger people something, you might be called by old, but it's still you.
Right.
And so the person who addresses you kind of decides how you are going to respond. They are the one who's in control of that relationship. They're the one who you change for. It's still you, but you reply to the grandmother differently. You reply to the child differently. You reply to your friend differently. You reply to your parents differently. But it's still you. And I think God's very similar to you. That when we think of the one who gives peace, peace comes. If we want to think of God as, you know, the supporter of Christ, or as Krishna, or as something else, that's how He comes to us, because that's how we call, that's how we see, and that's how He cares to share that personality. Very wonderful being.
So you control the relationship you have.
You control the relationship with God.
God.
Yeah, He will come. And if you say, you know, I don't need you in my life, He says, okay, I appreciate that. Whatever you want. God is our servant. He is also available. He's a good servant. He's the one who can give you anything that you want. But you have to be able to ask, and you have to be able to listen. Listening is a big part of the meditation, being available for experience and feelings and understanding, and being able to quiet the mind, able to let go of some of the desires we might want, and to be able to be in tune with maybe what God wants for us also.
By listen, you mean you listen to God's response, or what? What do you mean by listen?
Have you ever listened?
Yes,
okay.
I'm listening to you.
Okay, and when you're listening, you put your attention into what's coming to you. And so when you walk outside, if you listen to nature, you kind of silence your mind, and you become available, and it transforms the experience. What you're able to do when you listen is to somehow put the energy of creating and thinking out of your head into a more receptive feeling. And so you're able to allow different things to come in and allow those things to activate experiences. And so when we listened for what God might say, then we're able to feel the peace, have the love increase, have an understanding, have that sense that there's care. And so we can also have feelings and experiences in relationship. You know, if I'm looking to be nurtured, if I'm feeling a little down, then maybe if I had a little more love from my mother in my life, then God can bring that feeling in and I can experience that. But I need to not worry so much about getting it, but allow and request and open myself up for that response.
So to master this art of listening and to control your mind, did you have to bring in any physical, lifestyle changes?
I kind of did it through, yes, I'll answer your question. Yes, I did change my lifestyle because it was something that I had read and I believed in. I believed what it was because I tried to reason it through. That in my experience, one was my timetable, what I did during the day. I'm pretty average American, you know, I would have watched TV, I would have gone out, I would have done things, and they were fun. They were fine. I have no sorrow about that. But I also realized that there was a spiritual part that I wanted to nurture, and I wanted more of that. And during the day, when I was busy, at the end of the day, didn't have the energy. And would ask you and all your viewers to try it. It's a quiet energy in the morning. And so it's easier to listen, it's easier to think, it's easier to practice the things of the mind, the spiritual qualities. And so I started to get up earlier than I used to. And I found that that was beneficial. That when I practice thinking and practice experiencing and practice being more peaceful, that energy, that experience was more available to me during the day. And so therefore I was able to access that. So I became more spiritually powerful if I got up earlier and practice these things and kind of let go of some of the things that took away my energy. I stopped watching TV.
Oh, you never watch TV now?
I watch it on the flights over, a few things. I don't have a TV because I have other priorities. Not to say that your listeners should throw their TV away. This is a good program. But it seemed to me that, I listen to things differently. And so being able to edit what goes on in the world saved me a lot of time. And I was able to use that time in more personally advantageous ways. So I changed a lot of things. I changed my schedule, I changed my diet, had read quite a bit and still am always interested in what it is that we take in through the mind affects our life. And so practicing nurturing with thoughts of peace and things like that are helpful. But also what you take into your body, obviously has an effect. If you drink too much soda, you can get all that sugar. A lot of people are obese in the United States because of this. If you eat what we call junk food, there's no calories, you eat more. There's consequences. And so if you eat food that is pure or organic or elevated or appropriate and you prepare it in that way, then it's advantageous both physically and spiritually. You have the ability to do that. So I started looking at what I did, started fixing different things. Some things I let go of.
So what did you let go of?
I became a vegetarian. I grew up in the Midwest in the United States, and it's known as farming community. I grew up in a small town, small city, but there were lots of big farms around. And they grew, corn and soybeans and cows and pigs and chickens, and they fed a lot of the country. There's a lot of animals out there. And you grow up, and that's just how what was around. And there was nothing wrong with that. There was, I had a big kind of a conversation in my mind that the culture that I grew up in was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. But I wanted to do something even better for myself. I wanted to understand how I could access a spiritual part, and I believe that certain foods, certain ways the foods were created would affect my mind. And I wanted to make that stronger and more powerful. And so letting go of some things and increasing others I found to be beneficial for myself.
In this episode, Eric shared a few more of his experiences as a Raj Yogi, and he will be there with us in yet another episode to take us further on the spiritual journey. Thank you, viewers, for joining us. Thank you, brother, for spending your time with us.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you, viewers, and do join us in the next episode. Have a good time. A big welcome to all the viewers watching Soul to Soul Talk Show. As mentioned previously, we will be continuing this journey with Eric Lawson, an insurance engineer from New York. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you.
A pleasure to have you with us.
Wonderful to be here.
So, brother, in the journey covered so far, you had explained how you self-taught the spiritual knowledge that you got after coming in contact with the Brahmakumaris. You self-trained yourself with the art of Raj Yoga, and you built a relationship with God.
Okay.
So, having sort of had this foundation of spirituality in your life, did that affect your relationship with that you shared with your family, your friends, the society?
Yes, it did, dramatically. Because when I had the awareness that kind of I was the spiritual being, that who I am is eternal soul, that really changed a lot of things for me. And I wanted to pursue that. I found great joy, great happiness, that there were a lot of good feelings with those values, with that practice, with that understanding. And so, anytime you do something different, or there's a change, that affects everything around you. And it affected everything around me. What I wanted to do was to have more of that experience of being peaceful. And so when I started to change my routine, I didn't have time for some of the same things I used to do.
Okay.
And so I let some of those go away. I didn't reject them, and I didn't think that they were bad, but I was moving in another place, and there were other things I wanted to do. And so I changed, and my choices changed, and my relationships changed, and how I work changed.
How did the relationships change?
Which ones would you be?
Say with your family, your parents.
All right.
Are you married?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not married.
Okay.
But I was.
Okay.
But not before this. Okay. So when I came into the spiritual knowledge, I had been married.
Okay.
Okay. So it didn't affect my personal. I was living by myself.
Okay.
And so my routine, my eating habits, a number of things did change. And that was a challenge. It was described to me one time, and I think this works very well, that when you're in a relationship or a friendship or with family with someone, everybody kind of learns how to dance the same dance. Okay, you have this, you do this, and there's a routine, and there's an interaction, and there's a pattern that's set up. And when you change, you force everybody else to adjust somehow. And not everybody's always ready to change.
Right.
If you're a dance partner and you move this way, they have to come with you if they're going to be your partner. And so anytime somebody does something that's not used to it, one might be in a caste, and if they don't follow the rules of that caste, everybody in the family or that group kind of is threatened because there's something different. They're going outside of that. There's a change. And so that's a situation I put my friends and family into, and my work individuals. There was a time when at work you would have to entertain clients. And so in the insurance business, that would mean something. You would go out, you would have dinner, you would stay out late, there would be drinks, and there would be just kind of that camaraderie that was built. And when one stops doing that, people, what's going on? They question, and it forces them to think about themselves. They think about, well, why is he doing it? Is he rejecting, or is? And so when you change, you actually offer the opportunity, or another way of saying it is you force other people to reflect and to change, or possibly change also. And not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody is willing to do what's right for themselves. It's quite amazing, actually.
So, in a way, was your spiritual shift in this lifestyle not accepted?
It was accepted, but I learned a lot about how to still interact with others, because what was not accepted and what was not tolerated and what nobody wants is for me to say, I have found something, I have changed in a way that is better, and therefore I think you should do the same. Nobody likes that.
Right, nobody likes
Nobody
that.
wants you to
Nobody wants advices.
put your values
Right.
on them. It's very unpleasant all the way around. And unfortunately, a lot of people who find something, the new converts or the zealots or those who are the ones that do that the most. And it happens quite a bit in any kind of thing. Kids go through that. They find something and they want this, and then they forget it and they try something else. But for me, I learned that I needed to have that respect for others. That just because I found something and it's right for me, that doesn't mean that it's going to be. And so would offer and would share and sometimes say what I was doing and why and see what the response was. And if people were interested, they'd communicate that. And if they were not interested, you'd pick that up if you were sensitive. And so the relationships could be the same, sort of, but you didn't have to end them. But I also found that, I was in high school, went to high school and college, that even though you like people, even though that they're your best friends, everybody still moves on. And everybody moves on differently. And so I had some very good friends in high school, but over time, any choices that are made take us farther apart. And so trying to hold on to a moment or a situation is actually very, very, very difficult. With parents or with children or with friends or with workers, being in one place, having one awareness and trying to freeze that relationship at that moment in time is impossible. So whether we like it or not, we're always changing.
Have you lost any relations?
I don't necessarily keep in touch as well as I should. And I don't know if it's based on my spiritual perspective or things like that.
Okay.
However, I do believe that because of my choices, because of what I'm interested in, and because where I want to spend my time, those who don't want to spend time with me that way and spend time in others, there's been a gap that's grown in there. Doesn't mean that we're enemies, but we just don't need to spend our days together. And I'm thinking of some friends now. I went to a school and a college, and there was a lot of camaraderie through sports, and there was a lot of camaraderie through drinking alcohol. Okay, and I remember being a part of that and feeling the bonding. But personally, I don't need those things to have friends anymore.
Friendship, right.
And so when I stopped kind of spending my time in that environment, in that situation, I didn't share the things that I did before. And so that gap, that separation, that change was a little more predominant. And so I don't see them as much as maybe I would like to. On the other hand, I am a little remiss in making the effort to show up to a lot of those things too. You can't do everything and you can't be everywhere.
But
So
but can we say that this sort of change and gap that that you have experienced, is it like inevitable if one takes up spirituality?
no. And it even happens within the spiritual community.
Okay.
I recognize that I like to do certain things we're here in India, and within India there are some who like to sit for long periods of time. Okay, well that's great, but I get a little wiggly, and so I want to do something also. And there are those who want to spend all their time in the kitchen. Well, that's great too, but I don't want to spend all my time doing that. So there's always going to be gaps or changes with everybody. And so it's not the issue of spirituality. That might highlight it, that might make it very distinct, but there are a number of people that even who I like and share the same points of views and beliefs with, we're different, and so we don't want to spend that much time, even though we like each other. Okay? I don't think I want to talk to you for the next 48 hours. I need a break.
And have you changed your outlook on the purpose of your life, your
Yeah.
future after starting this journey?
Yeah, I have. because it brings some clarity. Before, spirituality or a religious belief for me was something kind of off to the side. And now it becomes more predominant, more of a major theme, major factor that I want to encourage. And I find that naturally, and it's not exactly my way of being, that because I like it, because I've enjoyed it, I'm very happy to share that with others. I'm actually happy and wanting to let others have that same experience. And so if there are people who are interested, I'm willingly want to spend my time with those. If they're not, then that's fine too. But there's something about the flow of energy that when I get something and I like it, I want to share that. And so, yeah, I've spent more time in a conversation like this, talking with people, sharing with people, answering questions, making things happen so that people can have this experience, and I find that to be great.
What about your inspirations, your role models? What did you have any person who inspired you to keep going on this journey? Was there anything that
not that I can think of?
Okay.
I think the people in my life have been very fine, but there's not one person. It's not like a Gandhi or a Mandela or a Martin Luther King or. They've been inspirations, and so I think each time someone like that comes in front of me, it's yes, I can do it. Unfortunately, for a long time I didn't know what I would be doing. And so there was a time when I wasn't quite sure what to do, how the world is working, why things are the way they are, a little bit of confusion. And so it's nice to know that there are people out there, but there wasn't a specific moment or instant or person or any one hero in that sense. Yeah.
In one more aspect, let's say we can call it a general assumed notion by the public that people who take up a spiritual lifestyle are quite emotionless, like they're very stoic, very they don't express themselves much.
Okay.
Has anyone given you that such a comment?
I don't think so. I don't recall anybody saying that, because I guess it's a personal kind of demonstration of how you feel. It is not a joyless or a unhappy place by any means. And I think this will be my opinion. Everybody can check and see what they find. But those who are very comfortable with themselves, those who have found spirituality and can integrate that, one of the aspects of, in my experience, of true spirituality is accessing joy and happiness and peace and bliss and those qualities and using them and being able to activate those in others. And that's a very interesting concept to me. Is if one is powerful, it doesn't mean that they are withdrawn by any means, but it means that they have the ability to spiritually activate those qualities in somebody else. And so, some people are naturally happy, some people are not as happy. And the more you have, the more you can share and bring out in others. So I think talking about spiritual things can be fun.
Were you a fun-loving person before?
I think so.
Are you still one?
I think so. I think so. Although fun is different. I mean, when I was much younger, you'd run around and do things. I don't have that much energy to run around and do the same things I used to a long time ago. But it doesn't mean that the creative understanding and the external show, of guffawing and laughing and the wildness is toned down. That's very true. But it doesn't mean that one can't find special qualities, inspirations, and have that nurturing of that experience, but still be able to see that anywhere else and bring that out in others also.
So how do you
How do I have fun?
Yeah, how do you have fun?
That's a very good question. Being creative. I think being creative is a nice way to tap into that. And some of the other things, and it depends on who I'm with. because I've got some friends in the spiritual things, and we can talk, and that we have a lot of fun just in our conversations. Because what's interesting about it is when you see things with someone who understands you, it opens a portal to be able to share. And so those who've gone on the experience, who've had these awarenesses, you can start to see things in one way and then start to see it in a little different, okay? And that can be a lot of fun. Just being able to change perspectives, seeing things differently, and stepping out of your own mindset and moving into somebody else's, and then being able to be flexible in how you see things can be quite entertaining.
Brother, you said now you do not have a TV and you avoid late night parties, and do you go to movies now?
I typically don't.
Okay.
Because what I have found is that entertainment, movies and TVs and things like this, is kind of an extension of someone's thinking and how they see the world, and either what they want to create or how they want to make others feel, or what they want to share from their thoughts. And I find that I'm very selective now. That what I have actually, the process I feel I've gone through is become aware of what I consume, both physically and mentally, and that how those thoughts, those images can affect me. And so I become a little more careful in what it is that I pick up, what it is that I might read or allow to come in, because I'm sure your listeners have had the experience of seeing something and then there's a shadow or an after effect or a residual experience. And so it stays with you. I don't like horror films. I don't like being scared or tense or anything like that. I feel I'm manipulated a little. But I do like to laugh. I do like to enjoy things. And so there's kind of not much of a network, but there are some people who say, well, this was a nice film because it's happy or joyful or peaceful or has a message. Those, and I can't think of anything right offhand, are fine. But I actually not so patient watching 2 hours of somebody else trying to sort something out necessarily. And so the movies aren't something I make a lot of time for, although a show like this would be very interesting to me. There are entertainments. I've seen programs here, and whether it's a cultural program, dances, singers,
concerts.
Yeah, jugglers, musical instruments. There's some people who are very talented, and that type of entertainment I find quite pleasing. But I have to be careful about what comes in, because it was said once very, very sweetly, is some images you can't unsee. Okay, so once you've seen it, it's entered into you,
right.
and you'll kind of remember it. There was a warning I saw somewhere, I don't know what it was on, but it was like a warning that you will not be able to unsee this.
Those images.
And they were right. I was like, oh my gosh, and I think that's very true. So I think if we were a little more conscious about what we take in, what we see, and what it actually does to us. One of the things that I also have understood or believe is that the more we accept something, the more that we, in a way, acknowledge and confirm that it's okay. And so when we watch something and they're doing, the smoking or the drinking or the things like that, tacitly it's in saying that this is fine. And I don't know if I agree with everybody. In the United States, there was a very good commercial about two parents, a couple, two parents, and they were interviewing a babysitter. And the babysitter was like, well, I'm thinking, and such like. But actually what they were doing was interviewing the TV show writer, okay? Because they were looking at the show, who's writing it? What kind of a mind frame are they at? What are their issues? What are they communicating? Are they upset? Are they angry? Are they giving violence? Is this okay? How do they treat women? What are they, what is in their mind, and how are they projecting that through the TV shows that their children watching? It was very well done. It was very well done because it was getting to the point of who's writing these things, what are their values, and how are they communicating that to you unknowingly. And so being selective in our habits as consumers, TV being one of them, and movies, seems to be very sensible.
But don't your friends miss your company when they still go out for movies?
Probably not.
Okay. Don't they like tell you, ask you to come, and do you say no?
Not so much anymore. There's a time when you say, I'm going to do something else, that they, tend to not think of that. And I've gone through that process. I had friends in high school, I had friends in college, I have friends in work. And it's been difficult for me to keep up with everybody I know. And so I start to spend my time more selectively. It was very difficult, but even keeping in touch with my family, I have to make time.
Right.
Time to see my mother. I've got a brother and a sister. And so just keeping up for that is one of those things. I'm not very good at those things, keeping how you doing and such like that. I don't call a lot. I have not much to say. I think of my life as pretty average, so what happened? Well, not much. And so there's no reason to call other than, hey, I'm okay, how you doing? So, but that's kind of not a deep friendship, so
Right.
see what happens.
So, but can you label or categorize all the changes that you have gone through as a yogi as positive, or are there any changes that you say, feel that it has had a negative effect in my life?
I'm going to say that they're all positive.
They're all okay.
But I've made it that way because I've been moving in a direction where that's where I want to be. And so I guess if you want to put it this way, there has been a price. The time that I used to spend doing the things I used to do, I've changed. And I've let go of some of those things, and I've moved on to the things that I like now, but I can't do everything.
Lastly, brother, has your quest for finding the truth, have you reached that objective, or is it still an ongoing process? Are you still on the quest for truth, or have you found it?
Yeah, I fully believe there's a lot more I can learn. I don't think I have found something and I can kick back and say, now I know everything, now everything is clear to me. That would be way overstating my situation. I'm comfortable with what I know, and I'm happy applying what I've learned about myself spiritually. But I don't think there's an end to it. I think one can always learn, one can always refine, one can always be in new situations, meet new people, and every time there's an interaction, another facet of the truth is exposed. So absolutely not. I don't feel that I've found anything, and I don't think that anybody has.
Right.
Okay? No matter what anybody can do, I think if they're honest, they can learn more. There's always a deeper part of the self, the universe, the world, the relationships. And I think if we knew everything...
we would be God.
That's a good answer. We might be God, but at the same time we might not know what to do with it. So still learning, still trying, and still happy.
And would you like to give a message to all the viewers who have been watching you for so long on what they should, at least try to experiment with spirituality?
They might have heard something like this before, but it is better to try something and regret that it didn't work out, rather than to regret not ever trying.
Not ever trying, right.
And that would be something I feel very comfortable. To go with what you think is right, within limits, and put your energy towards what you want, because sacrificing yourself will not make you happy and actually won't make anybody around you happy. To have that and be able to share it is much better. So I hope all your viewers are able to take a step forward in their spiritual journey too.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as suggested by Brother Eric, we wish you also try to change your outlook on spirituality, as because it is just a change in your attitude, and it can be fun too, but unless you try it, you will not be able to experience and change the, say, your old belief and your outlook on spirituality. Hoping that all the experiences shared by brother has inspired you to take this first step. We take leave from you and Brother Eric. Thank you, brother, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for us too. Thank you, viewers, for joining us in this journey. Hope to see you soon with yet another eminent personality. Thank you. Have a great day.